me, part of what's going on here is a significant difference between kids and adults in how we engage reality. Kids are new to the world, new to the reality, and so they are naturally positioned to want to figure out how things work, to
Yeah.
figure out what life is all about. Meanwhile, us adults, we stubbornly feel like we've already figured it out. We've already decided it. And that blocks us from being able to be curious and open.
So, welcome back to Coffee with Bearded Bad Dad. Today, my guest, Paul Granger. You're an author and you're a missionary. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah,
So, what's first of all, what's being a missionary like?
I
Because I
know.
think we've all got these ideas on what it's like and what you do. So, why don't you tell us what that's like a little bit? What it is you do, how far away you travel to do it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that was part. Somebody might have caught my hesitation there, because I usually don't refer to myself as a missionary, even though I serve with a mission sending organization. And the way I function looks very different than most of the people that I serve alongside. So a lot of the folks that I serve alongside are from all over the world, and they go all over the world. Uh, I feel like God's invited me to love my neighbors in Richmond, Virginia, and I've not left the state in a while. I think, right? And so, what does that look like? Well, I think the first starting point is to even note, in case your listeners are wondering what I mean when I say I identify as a missionary, as a Christian. Uh, for me, I like to refer to myself as a Christ follower more than a Christian because, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean I'm not a Christian, but the term Christian carries a lot of connotations now. And what that word can mean among a group of 10 people can be 10 different things. So for me, what it looks like is I want to live in the way that Jesus lived. He loved everyone he encountered. He lived for something beyond the here and now, beyond just his own life. He was willing to sacrifice for the sake of something greater than himself. And so that's my hope is how can I embody that in my life day in and day out? So what being a missionary looks like for me is waking up and saying, how can I love God and love others today? Functionally, it's looked different every year since I've started doing this in 2018. Sometimes every month, sometimes every day. Today looked very different than what I thought it was going to look like. But the core of it has always remained the same, that in any given day, I'm going to have an opportunity to love God and love others. And I'm going to have a choice to make whether I do it or not, whether I'm humbly attentive or not. For me, it's looked like everything from I was talking with a family member in the hospital today. That was a part of it, right? To put out some podcast episodes yesterday, to writing books and self-publishing them, and then doing a lot of administrative stuff and higher level things with YWAM. I mean, it is a mixed bag, but that again, that core is always the same. That my life isn't about producing projects or achieving outcomes. It's in service to others, in
That's
an act of
interesting.
love to others. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because one of the things that I say a lot is my goal for every day is to be a better man, father, husband than I was the day before. And that's very interesting. The it's kind of the same mindset. You have today's a new day and it's a chance to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that fascinating. Like not only from a personal perspective because it matches what I do, but it also is fascinating because you've written 24 books. You had mentioned that you had mentioned that I forgot where I was going with that, but sometimes that happens in
I know.
podcasts.
Yeah.
But anyway, it seems like to me that when we have that mindset that every day is a new day, it's a little hard to wake up like angry or sad or depressed. And when you have that type of mindset, you move like it's not like you move through the day conscious of that. It's just like a mantra that you start out like, today's a new day. It's a chance to serve. And I think that's great and awesome. What you said Richmond, Virginia. That's that's something that it's interesting to me that you're in Richmond, Virginia, and I've been thinking about Richmond, Virginia all morning today. The government just released a bunch of UFO files this morning,
Oh, I had not
and
heard.
yeah, so it's I'm a big UFO nut. I got the alien behind me over here. So I look at that stuff as like entertainment for me, but the government released a bunch of UFO files this morning, so I'm very excited about that. Is there any talk about that, like where you are?
I have not heard anybody talking about aliens
Really,
today,
really?
this week, recently. I don't know. Maybe Richmond isn't as except when I do live down the street from this big facility, this convention center, and it's very common for me to see aliens walking down the street when it's like Comic Con or Galaxy
Yes.
Con. We have a number of those events, so I have seen aliens in that sense. But yeah, no, not many conversations around it, which is
It's
interesting because it's been in the news
yes.
increasingly over the last year or so.
It has, and it's there's some that some people have put in a kind of a religious connotation to it, and
Oh
talking
yeah,
about angels, demons, and stuff like that. That's why I asked it, and it's very interesting to me personally, and I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on all of that. But
uh,
we can go to a different direction. So what else do you fill your time like? I understand like writing, and you've self-published a lot of books, and like how many total? You said 2 dozen, right?
it's at least 2 dozen, and there's another one that needs to come out this month that I'm just realizing I need to start working on.
Where do you find all those words?
Oh man, that's an excellent question. So a big reason that I write is actually the core of why I do any of what I do, which is to cultivate authentic, accessible space to process this confusing thing called life for those that identify as Christians, to process, well, who God is, who He's created us to be. What does that mean for today? For those who are wrestling with the concept of God, to process those questions. Why does it make sense that doubt exists, right? And so part of the way that I've felt led to do this is by creating a myriad of spaces. So it can be sitting on my porch and having a conversation over coffee, but writing books and doing the podcast has allowed me to create these spaces for people I may never meet in places I may never go. And it's not like I'm coming to this as an expert. In fact, most of the things that I've written are things that I'm processing and navigating in real time. To give an example, earlier this year, I found myself really wrestling with the concept of hope. There's a lot going on in the world that can make us feel hopeless. There's a lot going on in my life that has seemed like no matter what I do, it's not just not getting better, it's getting worse. And then as someone who identifies as a Christ follower, I see all these verses that seem to speak of hope, and I'm like, "All right, God, where is this coming into play?" And I realized I had two options. One, just to wallow in my frustration around this topic, or two, to press in. And so I felt this sense that I should spend some time looking at verses on hope. And over the course of 30 days, I looked at 30 passages. It ended up being 31 passages, and just honestly processed it. What was funny is the first several, I audibly laughed. I ended up recording myself live doing it as a form of accountability, but also as an opportunity to really be vulnerable so people could see me honestly wrestling with it. And I would read the verse and I would just laugh because one of them, the first one I think said, uh, the my soul says the Lord is my portion, and I'm like, it does not feel like that to me. I feel pretty hungry right now. I do not feel like I've been sustained. And it's that honest exploration that one allowed me to create something authentic, but two, to be able to create a space that people could come to, because if I just present myself as having it all together, there's a lot of people that are not going to be able to connect with that. That's how, even in life, we can present ourselves in a way. Look at social media. How much
Oh
of
yeah.
our friends' profiles are like the best versions of themselves? And if we feel like the worst version of ourselves, it might be hard to look at our friends. It might be hard to look at their vacation. It might be hard to look at their marriage. It might be hard to look at their life because they seem like they're in such a better place than we are.
Yes,
But
yes,
but when a friend is like honest and and honest in a healthy way, sometimes we feel seen and heard even if that friend doesn't know what we're going through. And
exactly.
so the things that I've written, you were asking where those words came from. Some of it comes from that honest processing. Some of it I can't tell you. I feel like God's invited me to write something and I don't even know what it's going to be. And then suddenly it's just happening. Uh, and I just roll with it, which a lot of last year's words were that. I don't know how they came about because I did not have the mental capacity to create a book, much less the desire at times. And yet here we are, another thing being self-published. And
that's
and it
that's
what's
awesome.
what's wild is there are times where I know what I want to do, and those are the times that I hit that writer's block. And I'm like, all right, I
Right.
guess this book's not happening today.
Yeah, it's like that every time I sit down to write. And I personally don't like writing. I I have the creativity for it, but not the so I have autism, and it, as it turns out, I've had it my whole life, but I've just diagnosed at the age of 40, and so it's become a big part of my life. But I've realized little things over the years that can be directly tied to that. One of them is writing, because I use pen and paper. I don't like to type, and I use way too much pressure when I'm pushing down on the paper. You had mentioned hope, and that a lot of people are missing hope, or they feel like they don't have any hope, or they feel hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
that's that's also very interesting to me in this conversation here. What I find in in podcasting in general is it gives me a chance to reach out to people, and or for people to reach out to me and just have a normal authentic conversation. And so when I'm having a podcast like with you right now, I'm not thinking about the recording. I'm not thinking about the audience. I'm right here with you right now.
Yeah.
And in doing that, there is authenticity there, but I find it easier to it's less of a mental load on me. Like I'm not pretending, and it's just way easier to go through life that way.
Yeah.
And when talking about hope, I like to spread hope.
Yeah.
I really do. And in these tough times when you have um, right now it's right versus left, Christians versus whoever else, atheists. It's a lot of tribalism,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I like to spread hope in that I tell people, like, man, you can just shut that off. You can just tune that out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, no, I can't do
You
that.
can. Yeah.
And like, yeah, you really can. Like, I
Yeah.
understand people have jobs, they got to go to work. You go to work, you do your job, maybe you don't have to keep your head down, but you just, at the end of the day, just go home and shut it all off. That's all you got to do, is just shut it off. And I know for a lot of people, it's easier said than done. But once you are able to do that and take a breath and take a minute, even if it's just 20 minutes to shut off your phone, go sit in your car or whatever for 20 minutes and just breathe a little bit. And you have to understand that we're all going to be okay. At the end of the day, we're all going to be great. Everything's going to be great.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned something really important. You talked about that when we're having this conversation, you functionally do have to think about certain things on a level, but in the moment, you are choosing the conversation as the primary thing you're focusing on,
Right.
right? And what you're talking about is presence. And presence is the thing that we surprisingly miss so much. Uh, I was thinking as you talked about my conversation with my brother who's in the hospital, and he's navigating a brain tumor right now. It was something he went through surgery and radiation years ago. It's come back. And we are talking about this idea of hope. And he shared there are many well meaning people who will say to him, just hang in there, just lift your head up, and they mean well. And it's not that what they're saying is wrong, but there are times where they're not fully present with him in that moment, because in that moment, he doesn't need a platitude. And in fact, a platitude could actually be harmful,
Yeah.
because in that moment, he might be feeling right on the cusp of hopelessness. And he doesn't need a rah rah speech. He needs someone to just sit with him and see him and affirm, yeah, this is an awful situation. Yes.
That's amazing. I've actually had that same exact feeling. A
Mm-hmm.
couple years ago, I had this lump in my neck, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I didn't know what it was. Doctor didn't know what it was. They had to go in, take it out, biopsy it. Turns out it was nothing. But in
Mm,
that moment, when they told me about that, I wasn't really sad. I was worried and a little bit angry, but I wasn't sad.
yeah.
Um, but I knew that I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it with everybody else. I didn't want to talk about it with family members. I didn't want to talk about it with friends. I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that was because I didn't want to hear those things. Those, oh, it's gonna be fine. You'll be fine. And well, what if I'm not? You know, and like there's this certain level of honesty that you have to roll with when you like, oh, there's a chance I might not be okay. There's a chance
Yeah.
that and we all have to deal with that in our own special way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to hear maybe it's a little condescending, or that presence that we're talking about, that they're not really present and feeling how I'm
Yeah.
feeling or understanding how
Yeah.
I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And when I explained it to my wife, I was like, hey, can you run interference for me and talk to these people when they have questions, answer them, because
Yeah.
like I don't want to keep having this conversation over and over and over again
Yeah.
because people are curious or people just want to know or they're worried. I just don't. I just want to say it once, be done with it,
Yeah.
and deal with it my own way.
Yeah.
And so I've had that exact feeling. I didn't want the affirmations. I didn't want the everything's going to be okay, because like I knew like being honest is my number one thing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes we have to be prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah. Well, and this is the problem then that we run into with both hope and presence is we're not always honest about what we think is supposed to happen, what we think needs to happen. So with hope, we get in our mind how life is supposed to be, what's supposed to happen, and then if it's not going that way, that's when hopelessness hits. With presence, we're not always aware of what we think is supposed to happen in terms of agenda. So when we talk about this situation where someone's navigating a health thing or a hardship, we're not always honest with the fact that our main agenda is that we don't want that person to be sad, or we don't like the negative mood that's going on, or we don't want to be brought down ourselves. And even on the most positive end of the spectrum, that we want the person to be happy, them being happy may not be what needs to happen in that moment, right?
Sometimes
But
people just want to cry.
sometimes people need to cry. Grief
Yeah.
is such an important part of the human experience. And when we stifle that, when we stifle processing, we could do a lot of damage. And so, presence and hope necessitate us being honest about what we think is supposed to happen, what we think life is all about. And part of our journey, then, as people, is to learn where we might be misaligned or off track on that, and how to lean into those spaces where we don't know, but we have a sense that we're heading in the right direction. And you
Yeah.
noted it. Part of your honest processing in that was to say, I really hope that I'm okay, but there is a scenario in which I'm not. And there's a scenario in which I'm not okay, but it will still be okay in the end, right?
Exactly.
And that allowed you to exist in that space in a not just healthier way, but with the strength that couldn't have existed if you are just crushed under the anxiety and fear of, oh my gosh, What if this ruins my life? What if this changes everything? We constantly, as people, are faced with the opportunities of choosing either fear or love. And we lean into fear more often, even though we don't want to, because it feels like we have more control there.
Yeah.
But the truth is, man, when we give the keys to fear, we are giving up a lot of control and a lot of opportunity to find peace in the most unexpected of places.
Yes. Yes. And that goes hand in hand with faith, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It does. And so I've found my faith in some weird ways, brother. I weird ways. So I've had several psychedelic experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, to make a long story short, I'm not religious by any means. I don't go to church. I consider myself a Christian, but that's as far as it goes. I'm more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of all of this, I'm I know where I'm going. I'm gonna be okay. Everybody, we're all gonna be okay at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where that attitude comes from, is my faith.
Yeah.
And I lost it for a long time. I've found it again through the use of psychedelics, and that's not for everybody, but it certainly was for me. I found that life is it's very tough sometimes, but that tough part of life is what makes it worth living. It makes everything worth it. And the hard things are what I live for the most. When things get tough, it's like you got to figure it out and power through it. But I don't ever think of losing my faith in the aspect of I'm angry with God, or I'm angry with, whatever deity I choose that day. I'm not angry about it, and I wasn't angry about the lump of my neck, um, for, as faith goes. I was more angry about it, like my body is failing me kind of
Right.
stuff. But
Yeah.
for me, it was all about, okay, this is what's next. This is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know a whole lot of people that operate that way, but it seems to bring me a lot of peace.
Yeah.
And it seems to bring me hope, I guess, is another one, another aspect where hope comes into it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about all these things, over the last decade or so, I've really noticed an uptick in religiosity, and Christianity. Have you found that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And and I was thinking about that even as you were talking, and you were talking about Christians against, and you're trying to fill out with the fill in the blank, and you said atheists, but I'm like, nowadays there are certain demographics of Christians that are even against other Christians.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mess, and I do want to talk about that. Uh, but I want to lead in, even coming off of what you just said, because you were talking about how we can engage hardship. And it comes back to what we noted, that a big piece of it is what we think is supposed to happen. So the reason we struggle most with hardship is because we think we're supposed to have a life without hardship. We
Yeah.
think that hardship is a thing that's not supposed to happen. It is bad. So when it does, something is wrong. You need to fix it so you can get back to the equilibrium of everything is good.
Right.
But what you and I have come to realize is that's not the purpose of life, to avoid all hardship. What you and I are after, what all religions and people who do not consider themselves religious, I think so many of us, what we're really core after is truth. Like we want to know what's actually true.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered is hardship is a vital part of the process of finding out what's true about what we are holding on to. Because in hardship, you really, if you're paying attention, you will come to realize the things that you've got a death grip on.
Yeah.
And if you are willing, you can get to a place where you learn how important it is to release that death grip on pretty much
Yes.
everything. I've got a sign behind me that says holding things loosely. Sometimes we will hold so tight to even good things that we don't realize the harm that it's causing. I was talking with a guy on my podcast this week, and he was sharing how he's now retired and he's at a place in life where he suddenly realizes, oh, I don't have to worry about death in the same way I used to. Like I was so afraid of dying when I was young, but now I'm like, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And I don't have to worry about money. I used to worry so much about money, but now I realize money isn't as big as I realized it was. Time and age allows people to suddenly realize the things we thought were the most important things aren't.
Yes.
And so hardship is not something to be avoided, but an opportunity to discover what is true. And this is where we run into an issue with many who identify as Christian and many religions in general is there is still that core desire for truth, but we are so bad at realizing what things we are holding on to.
Yes.
And for, speaking as someone who identifies as Christian, the last decade has been tremendously heartbreaking for me because a Christian is supposed to be one who follows Christ. As I shared at the start, someone who looks at the life of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, and strives to live in that way. And love was one of the core elements. And over the last decade, I've seen so many people who wear the label as Christian that are operating in ways that are not
Yeah.
loving, that are not love. And they may believe that it is because what they might be holding on to is a political identity or a tribalism that says I have to protect my version, my people of Christianity. And when we are holding on to this death grip on things, and now it is attached to something that is supposed to be the biggest thing. If we believe in a God, if we believe in a certain religion, that is the most important thing. And if that thing is now tainted by our death grip on things that are not that, we suddenly create something very different. And this has been an issue with pretty much every religion, but particularly Christianity and God following from the start. You look at Jesus's time, the big issue he dealt with was people who were supposed to be the ones who knew God holding a death grip onto their power and their authority and their assumptions, and they end up killing the son of the God they said they followed, right? And they couldn't see the missteps. If it can happen at that scale, then of course it can happen now. Where we're
Absolutely.
seeing it, and man, it is really heartbreaking, the divisiveness, but really it's a sides mentality, because that's at the end of the day what it often comes down to is not even core beliefs that people are holding on to, but the side that they believe that they're on. And when man, it is so common now for us to see people who will actually reject truth because it could cause their side to take a hit or lose.
Yes.
And
Yes.
man,
And
when we were created, I believe, to want that truth, and suddenly we live in a way that actually opposes truth, that's when it can get really messy. That's when you get,
yeah.
again, like Christians bombing abortion facilities
Yeah.
or going online and saying the most vitriolic things to other people who are supposed to be their brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yes.
Things that like they probably never thought that they would do, but they're now doing it because there is such a disconnect between the actual pursuit of truth and the actual preservation of themselves and their side. And
It's
it's almost
almost like
hard
they
to take a
can't
break.
separate the idea from the person sometimes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And the reality is if you go in deep enough, it's going to cost you. And the deeper you go, the more it's going to cost you. There are people that are
Yeah.
now realizing that they had aligned themselves with the wrong leader or the wrong group or the wrong mindset, that are really afraid right now, that are kind of staying quiet because they're like, I don't know what to do with this,
Yeah.
because if I come out against it, my current side could come against me,
Right.
and the other side might not accept me, and I could look like a fool. My reputation could be ruined. Things that I built my life around, I might have to suddenly turn away from. And now what am I going to do? It really
It's
does
going back to
cost
that
people.
holding on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, you've almost described what it's been like for the last few years for me. Heartbreaking is a great word to describe it, because when you hold this knowledge inside you, inside your heart, and you know that things aren't really the way they're being portrayed as, and you really know in your heart that everything's going to be okay, and you see these people going at each other, and you want to help, but you realize at the same time, if you do jump into that, you're likely going to come out hurt on the other side. And it's so difficult to watch these things. And it's kind of made my circle a lot smaller than it used to be, because I have to protect the ones in my house. I have to protect us and our sanity. And it's not like I want to leave everybody else behind. It's not that. I'm absolutely willing to have a conversation with anybody,
Yeah.
but one like ad hominem attacks really,
Hmm.
it doesn't make me mad. It hurts my feelings a little bit.
Hmm.
But I don't let it really get to me all that much, because like these people really don't know me.
Yeah.
And but that's when I know it's time to cut the conversation off and walk away,
Yeah.
because like I'm not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere. I don't enter conversations ever to change people's minds.
Hmm.
I just want to talk. I just want to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of people are holding on to ideas that maybe were never meant for them to hold it in the first place. I think consumerism is one of the big ones. I
Hmm.
held on to consumerism for so long because I wanted the nice things. I had to have the big screen TV. I had to have the new car. I had to have the best of everything. And now I'm just like, I don't want any of this shit.
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter at the end of the day. None of it really matters. Even money. You talked about money. If people really understood money, they would understand that we don't really need a whole lot of it,
Yeah.
to really, I mean, to live the way we're supposed to live, it's almost free,
Yeah.
even in, 2026, it's almost free to live the way we should be living.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and to really have these conversations with people that don't understand, they're still holding on to their iPhone. They're the latest iteration of the iPhone and saying, well, this one's not as nice as the new one. I got to go get the new one, but I just bought this yesterday. And it's exhausting sometimes to look at that and say, you're being played,
Yeah.
but I want you to be happy. So you do
Yeah.
you. And I understand how the world works, and how,
Yeah.
I understand money at a whole different level
Yeah.
than just dollars and cents.
Hmm.
It's about resources and who has and who hasn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Well,
big game.
and it's hard because even if you come to a deeper understanding of what's actually true, that doesn't mean that things will get easier completely because you may still be in a context where nobody else sees it that way. So money
Yes.
is a big one for me because I I believe in and operate around certain mentalities of money that uh, make people uncomfortable and sometimes get some opposition. And in hearing what you just shared, I think you're going to be okay. Uh, I wrote a book called "God Won't Provide: The Lie We Don't Believe We're Believing," and the core of it is it's calling out this reality that Christians will get together on Sunday and say, God's my provider, God will provide. And then on Monday, live as though it's not true. Yeah, God will
Yeah.
provide, but I've got to get my money. I've got to do this, that, or the other. And scripture, I mean, Jesus calls this out. He says, you can't serve both God and money. Like you're going to love one and hate the other, but you're not able to serve them both. But, here in America, it is very much a culture driven by money, but also by having more, by never being satisfied. And here's what's wild. You know, we're talking about these different spaces in which it's easy for us to lock into a mindset and hard for us to leave. A big part of it is we do not realize the bubbles we exist in.
Yeah.
And one of the healthiest things that can happen for us is when we suddenly encounter other bubbles and realize the world is much bigger. You know, it's easy in America for everyone to see where they are and their eyes to be focused on those who have more and to feel like we deserve more. But here's
Yes.
the reality: you and I, we are engaging with a lot of technology right now. We have
Yes.
strong internet access. We have, headphones, earbud things in. We got microphones, and we're creating a podcast. You and I have food in the house, we've got clothes on our back, which means we are wealthier than the majority of the world,
and that
right?
blows my mind. That
Right?
blows my mind.
But it is hard. It's one thing to say that and to want to lean in, but for other people, it becomes harder when you start to realize. But does that mean that I have to give up all my things? And but I also still want the other things. And my friends are going on their second vacation, and I don't, you know. And so, man, it is so hard to resolve to live based on the truths that we're discovering when the world around us isn't following suit. And you talked about, the books that I'm writing. Man, I have to live into this reality often because, again, my I mentioned that my perspective of money is controversial. Um, I've been in full time volunteer ministry since 2018. I haven't gotten a traditional paycheck since 2018. People are like, well, then how do you survive? Some of it is friends and family and their generosity, but the larger part, I can't even answer. I believe that God has provided. I've seen him provide in really unexpected ways. We had all the windows on our house, our 1905 house, replaced at no cost to us. That's like
Wow.
$15,000 or so, right? Like there are so many moments like that. Other moments too, where I'm like, I don't know how our bank account isn't empty. But,
Yeah.
but even if I do believe that God is provider, it doesn't change the fact that for the past year, finances have been way tighter. It doesn't
Yeah.
change the fact that when I share this with people, some people look at me and maybe not say it, but they're thinking this guy's irresponsible because he's a husband and he's a
Yeah.
father of three and a homeowner.
Boy,
And you're
I've
supposed to
had
be a
these
provider.
conversations with people. I've been a stay-at-home dad since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So people look at me like I'm crazy.
Yep.
And so for me, it was for my family and I the choice, and it was obvious to us because my wife's earning potential at the time when I quit working was quite a bit higher than mine. She had a college education. I had a GED. She was working in an office. I was working in construction, and now, you know, 12 years later, 13 years later, that's flipped.
Yeah.
I have better higher earning potential than she does, but at the same time, we're so comfortable with the
Yeah.
way things are. At least I am. I know my wife's stressed out, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's it's one of those things like people really do. They're like, how do you do it? And my mom used to say, boy, you could fall in a pile of shit and come up smelling like roses. And I didn't really understand what that meant. Like, I just thought it meant that I was lucky my whole life.
Yeah.
But it turns out like I've always looked at money differently than most people. Easy come, easy go is kind of how I look at it. I go out and earn a few dollars, and I got bills to pay, so I spend those few dollars. And but it's that sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice having more income to raise my kids in a okay. So our environment here is a little hostile. I'm the hostile environment guy. But I sometimes I yell, sometimes I get irritable, sometimes sometimes my kids look at me like I'm crazy because I've just flipped out.
Mm.
But they're allowed to have a voice. They're allowed to voice that uncomfortable. They're allowed to say, hey, dad, you're not being fair right now. And I will take that, I will look at it, and you know what, you're right. Give me a minute and I'll come back. We'll deal with this. Or, in that moment, I will work it out in my head and work it out with them. But I make the kids part of that process.
Yeah.
But something interesting that you've pointed out is I don't really understand sometimes how lucky I really am
Mm.
and how blessed we really are.
Yeah.
And we talk about income levels. Like, can you imagine what would be like for somebody who has a two income household to look at us and be like, you guys got the life. What, like, how do you guys do it? I've had people ask me that. And it just, I can't help but I'll be honest with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happens. I just
Yeah.
know that we struggle just like everybody else does. It's just our
Mm-hmm.
struggle is a little bit different. What
Yeah.
we struggle with isn't the same as what other people struggle with because we value things differently.
Yeah.
Like right now, we only have one vehicle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had wrecked my vehicle in November, and so now we're down to one car. It doesn't really bother us. I don't value vehicles like I used to. In a consumerism aspect, I don't have to have a new car.
Yeah.
A 20-year-old pile of crap car that barely runs is good enough for me. And people look at that, and I'll be driving around, you know, in an old beat up car,
Mhm.
and they find that irresponsible because I got my kids in the car and I'm driving from this place to that place. And I'm like, look, it's a depreciating asset. It's not valuable. The only thing that it does is it gets me to from point A to point
Yeah.
B. And as long as it does
Yeah.
that safely, I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and a lot of people look at that and they're like, that's crazy, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm able to stay here and raise my kids. I'm able to on a Friday morning, open up my computer and have a conversation with a wonderful person who's written a lot of books, and has a
Yeah.
podcast himself. I'm able to do these
Yeah.
things because I
Yeah.
value things differently.
Yeah. And that's that word value. That's the big piece of it. What actually brings value? What is actually valuable? What it has a lasting value? And we really do as people struggle with this idea of satisfaction because we
Yeah.
feel like because of our misaligned understanding of value, we will chase after it. What you and I know, and most people eventually come to figure out, is that money doesn't fix everything. More money isn't necessarily the answer. Maybe short term, if you get extra vacations and you can relax more, but long term, no. And there are so many incredibly wealthy people who are incredibly dissatisfied with life. Makes me think
Right.
of Hamilton and the song about being sad. You're never satisfied. You'll never be satisfied. And you see Hamilton had good things going, but I just need more. I just want more. Meanwhile, I've heard stories of people in the world who are living in extreme destitution. They have enough food for one more meal, and then a traveler comes through. And because of their value of hospitality, they say, come in, come in, come in to their maybe one room metal shanty, and they fix their last meal for this traveler. And the traveler's experience is one of seeing extreme joy on this family's face because their value is hospitality. Their value is showing love.
Yes.
And so they are content to give the little they have. And they are authentically joyful. They are happy. And there are people that would look at them and name all the reasons that that person couldn't be happy, right? But they found happiness because they understood what actually has value. Our fear with being satisfied is it feels like settling because we think, but what if I could have more? But what you just described is not settling. I've thought about the same kind of thing. The way that I've lived has actually brought tremendous value, not financial value, but tremendous value in so many other ways. It's freed my wife to return to teaching. And because I'm functionally the on call parent, if the kids are sick and this, that, and the other, a teacher can't just up and leave. For a teacher to take off work, they have to do more work. They have to create
Yes.
lesson plans, right? Well, she's been freed for the last 5 years to live into that. I've been able to be present in my kid's life in a deep way, which is particularly meaningful for me because my father passed away from a heart attack when I was 5. And so I didn't
Wow.
get to experience having my father in my life. I've been able to be even more in my kids' lives, especially when they were younger and I'm like working from home because they're too young to go into and then there are moments like you described of I'm getting to have this life-giving conversation with you. But then there's other pieces, and I did want to press into this. Uh, and this is I don't what I'm about to share. I don't want the takeaway for anyone to be, "Oh, Paul's so great," because of what
Yeah.
he did here. Because this was not my plan or idea. This is 100% God, and it is sometimes in spite of me. But I have a friend. He's in his upper 60s. Uh, he has spent most of his life not having stable housing, and for the 15 plus years that I've known him, usually he's on somebody's couch, in somebody's garage, or on an abandoned house's porch. And a couple years ago, I had already been in a relationship with him, but a couple years ago, things were starting to get rough for him. And there was a point where he was being kicked out of this abandoned garage that he was in. I have a rough garage. Like it's not sealed, it's not weatherproofed, it is not fit for someone to live. And for that reason, I never opened it up to him. But through a series of events, I felt like God was saying, let him stay in there. It's getting cold. And I'm thinking, okay, for a couple days. And I felt like God was saying, that's funny. It ended up being a couple years that he lived in our garage in the back. And through this, we developed an even deeper relationship because I would, on freezing days, like I would go out and be afraid I was going to find him dead.
Yeah.
And then when he wasn't, like checking, are you okay? Making sure he's eating, seeing his health decline. And the whole time I'm like, man, like I really, really believe if he could just get stable housing, his life would be better.
Yeah.
And nothing was working out. But then through a series of events, and really credit to some of his other friends, he was able to get his first apartment in his whole life, his own place. Paid $26 a month because he, was making no money,
Right.
and suddenly I got really optimistic. One, this place is much healthier than my garage. You have air conditioning, you have a bathroom. I thought things were going to turn around. They did not, for a number of reasons. One, if you live an unsheltered life for long enough, you create these rhythms. So even though he had a bathroom, didn't mean he was going to shower because that wasn't a part of his rhythm. Didn't mean he was going to
Right.
do his laundry because that wasn't a part of his rhythm. Two, uh, there were people, including some that had helped him, that saw opportunities to take advantage of him. I
Yes.
got him
Yeah.
set up with benefits finally, and they knew they could get the check sent to them.
Yeah.
There were people that would come in, sneak into his apartment that were banned from the building, that would steal his groceries. And the biggest reason why all this could happen is because he had onset dementia. We didn't
Yeah.
know it yet, but I knew something was wrong. Um, Even when I tried to get a doctor's appointment, it was set for a year out. So for a year, I know something's wrong. People are taking advantage of it. He can't remember big things. His living situation is becoming like unsafe because of
Right.
the dirtiness and the mess. And I'm sitting there like, what in the world? Like this was supposed to work out. And in the end, it got so bad that I finally realized, one, all my efforts to get him into a better situation, to get him support, kept falling through. Part of it was brokenness in the systems. Part of it was just like unfortunate timing and situations. But I knew that my wild card was if I could get him admitted to a hospital, he gets past a lot of the red tape to
Yeah.
resources. Um, and he got to the point where I was like, he might be dead the next time I go visit him. And he was pretty close. And so I was like, all right, man, I've been prepping you for this. I think it's time to go to the hospital. I need you to understand, like, when I take you, you may never come back to this apartment. Like, I want to make sure you understand that. I'm not going to force you in anything, but I really do believe this is the best thing for you. And he knows that I love him, and he trusts me enough that he went. And it was still hit red tape, hit frustrations. But long story short, I finally got him through a series of events, and I really do believe God's power got him into a situation where he is still functionally living independently, but he has trained nurses that check in on him, make sure he's taking his medicine, take him to appointments. He's in the healthiest place he's been for a long time. Again, a lot of this was not because of me. And in fact, I was only at the table because of the scenario in which you described, right? Because I'm not working a traditional job, I had the freedom and flexibility and bandwidth to devote an abnormal amount of my life to this man who is not my family, who is decades older than me. And what did I gain from that? Well, I didn't get paid for it. I lost a lot of time. I lost a lot of comfort. I had to navigate a lot of poop over the last few years that was not my own, right?
And a
That's
lot of heartbreak.
and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of frustration at people taking. Like, there's a lot that I sacrificed and I lost, um, and I do believe that I did gain from it. But I even want to pause that because even that is still pulling me back into the mindset of my life being about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
one thing I've
struggle with
sat
that
with,
every day.
and if God did invite me to this, sometimes I wonder if what he was functionally saying to me is, "Hey, Paul, I want to invite you into something that's going to cost you a lot, and you're not even going to see the fruit that you want to see from it. But
Yeah.
your friend here, I love him more than you ever can, and I want these last few years of his life to be healthier. I want him to feel loved, even though he won't remember it the next day because of the dementia. But I want to invite you to sacrifice a lot for the sake of this other person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being willing to do that again was not because I'm such a good person. God kind of hoodwinked me into it. It's
Yes.
not,
Yeah.
but he knew deep down, I want I have a value around loving God and loving others. And so God knew that deep down, that is what I would choose, even in the times that I wouldn't. And so, what if there's so much in our life that is actually about more than our life and more than about ourselves? You're talking about households. And as a father, what you've come to learn, and it's just beautiful hearing you say that, is the the purpose here, the goal here, is not to create a perfect household where kids always do what they're told. You've abandoned that reality. And instead of letting that lead you to frustration or giving up, you've embraced presence. You've said, you know
Yes.
what? There are times where my kids are going to get it wrong, but I'm going to give them space to grow. There are going to be times that I get it wrong, and I'm going
Yeah.
to let them speak into that. And what you've created then is this new reality where it's not y'all are trying to be perfect parents, perfect kids, perfect household. It's we are a family and we are
Yes.
journeying together, right? And there are going to be things that you will do that will cost you so much. As a father, you've lost a lot of time and a lot of money having kids, right? That is
Yes.
just the
Yes.
nature of kids. But what I don't even have to know you well to know the value of your kids' lives being blessed as a result. You're happy to give it up, right? Is
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of my things is like I've been a father since I was 17 years old. I'm
mm,
41 now.
mm-hmm,
So my oldest is my see, she's 23. My then so it's 23, 22, 17, and 7.
mm.
So
That's a gap right there.
it is two marriages and um so I've actually in my life I've actually sat down and thought about these things like
Mm,
where would I be without my kids, you know, and I can be honest with them and be like, you know, I spent the best years of my life with you guys. And so it's like my 20s were absolutely amazing because of my family, not in spite of them. I tell people all the time like I live to be a dad. I really that's the greatest thing ever. And being a dad for me is I think it was what I was born to do.
yeah.
You know, it was like for me, being a dad is everything. When at 17 years old, when I found out that I was going to be a dad, it wasn't a death sentence to me. I wasn't sad. I was happy, excited, you know, and from there, we've had our struggles, you know, like everybody does. But I firmly believe the only thing that you need to raise a child more than anything else is love. And as long as you have love, everything else is negotiable. Everything else is negotiable, like rules, laws, health, all that stuff is negotiable. It doesn't mean it is as long as you have love, everything else
Yeah.
is surmountable. You know, you can climb that mountain as long as you have love. And you know, talking about your friend, oddly enough, my best friend is 17 years older than me,
Mm,
and not a very similar situation to yours, but my friend found himself in a position where he was married and he was living with his wife and his in-law, his mother-in-law, and just going through a rough time. They were going through a separation, and my friend was broke, you know, and my family and we went to Disney World and we had spent way too much money at Disney World. And when we left to go to Disney World, I told him, I was like, "Hey, I need a house sitter. You need a place to stay. So let's figure this out. You can stay at my house while I'm gone. And when I come back, we can figure out what we're going to do." And when I came back, I we had overspent like crazy.
it's
Like
easy to do at Disney.
it is. So we had left with one budget in mind and came back and blew through it and then some.
Mm,
And so I told him when I got back, I was like, man, you're going down and thinking about going to this hotel down the street for $400 a week. Why don't you give me $400 a month and sleep on my couch and I'll do your laundry? And
Mm,
he's like,
it's a good deal.
okay, that works for me. And so, this was, gosh, this was 2014.
Hmm.
And he's, at that time, he didn't have any credit. He didn't have a driver's license, he was he was very depressed. He was in a very bad spot. And when he came here, I was like, man, a lot of you've been mistreated, haven't you? People been mean to you, haven't they? And he's like,
Hmm.
well, not really. It is what it is. And I'm like,
Yeah.
let me show you some things. You don't have to do what these people tell you to do. Like you just what makes you happy? And so we start talking. I'm like, go do what makes you happy
Hmm.
because none of these other people really matter. The people that matter are your family and they're not here. So you got to do what makes you happy. And right now, I just saw him yesterday. He's coming over to redo my bathroom and do a bunch of work for me. Um, and I'm sure I'm going to get the friends and family price, even though I don't want that. I
Yeah.
advocate against that. I'm like, your friends and family, you're supposed to pay 120% instead of 100%, instead of 80%. They don't ask for a friends and family discount. Um, but he's owns his own business. He has a day job. His wife, he's married. Again, she has a great job. They don't have any debt. They're debt free,
Hmm.
and he owns a house, couple of cars, business, and all that. He's
Wow.
doing wonderful with his life. And man, I can't think of any other words other than happy. How happy I am for him,
Yeah.
and that's something that isn't. It's very rare, apparently. I
Hmm.
didn't know the outside world is a bunch of jealous assholes. I didn't know that. So when I'm talking to him and lifting him up, he's like, man, that's very rare, for somebody to say, to give a hand up and then praise you and do all these things. I'm like, man, I love you. You're my best friend. We go through a lot of shit together. And he's like, that's just it. We're in it together. He's like, that doesn't happen anywhere. He's lived all over the United States. He's like,
Yeah.
this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's just not my experience. People are awesome when they want to be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's the similar story as you had lifting someone up. There was heartbreak. I can't tell you how many times I was annoyed by this guy because like he's like the world's oldest teenager. He eats like
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
He it's loud sometimes up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, you know what? I love you, brother, and
Yeah.
and I hope you make it through this. And he did.
Yeah.
He got better, and not as
Yeah.
just as much as I helped him, he helped me. And that was I needed a best
Yeah.
friend at that
Yeah.
time. I needed somebody to pull me aside and say, "Hey, you're doing great, and I just
Hmm.
want you to know that."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we fed off each other, lifting each other up. And then we also have a circle of friends now that we talk and send messages through, like Facebook Messenger and group text messages where it's we just lift each other up. There's no jealousy
Yeah.
between us, and I don't care how much more successful he is than I am or how much more successful I am than they are. That
Yeah.
stuff does not matter to me.
Yeah.
And once you make it to that place, I think you can find true happiness.
Yeah. Well, and you're touching again on this idea of presence, but I think you hit something really important for people to sit with is presence is hard. Like there's reasons presence doesn't happen. So you noted this guy would annoy you sometimes. He's eating all your food, he's acting like a teenager, but he's older than you and so what can drive us to stay at the table for presence is one having a value of love. You have this value of seeing the the purpose in people, the value of people. Like you want to love others, and so that helps you to stay at the table. And then the other piece is you noted having this uh, deeper understanding, not just of what's supposed to happen, but of what is. I'll put it this way: you were able to recognize there's certain things he's doing that he shouldn't be doing. However, there are things that he went through that have shaped how he sees the world, how he engages with it.
Exactly.
You talked
Exactly. And
about,
that was one of the things that I had to impress upon him all the time is
yeah,
like, you've been through some shit, brother.
yeah,
You like, this isn't normal. Like, people shouldn't be treating you that way. I would go through these scenarios. Things would happen to him, not because
mm-hmm,
of him.
mm-hmm,
And I had to tell him that. I'm like, these people are taking advantage of you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you don't have to, like, as long as you understand what's happening, that's all
mm-hmm,
I care about. If you
yeah,
understand that they're taking advantage of you and still let that happen, that's on you.
yeah,
I'm just saying, these people aren't for you.
yeah,
These people aren't here for you. Be careful. I had those conversations with him, and he's like, he would tell me, like, I've never had that happen before. I've never had people look out for me like that before. And
mm-hmm,
I'm like, and that's why you are the way
yeah,
you are,
yeah,
because people have been doing this to you for a long
yeah,
time. And you think this is how you win their love. But the truth is, they're going to do this shit to you no matter what you're doing to them or what you're doing for them.
yeah. And you talked about autism earlier and finding out later in life and looking back and seeing, oh, this is why I did this. This is why I function in this way. It made me think of one of our kids has received a few diagnoses that explain a lot, right? And it's helpful for him to know that. And we had those same conversations with him. But it has also impacted my understanding of what presence looks like with
Yeah.
him because as a dad, who still has to fight the expectation of, oh, if I do everything right, my kids will do everything right. Um, not only is that not true in general, but it's even less true when some of these diagnoses significantly impact who he is in any given moment, how he responds in any given moment. So part of my ability to be present is not just to have a value of love, but an awareness that things are bigger than I understand, deeper than I understand. And so, somebody listening to all this can say this is all good and well, but what I do with it, do any of your listeners, will they be able to see video?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Okay,
this is video on YouTube and
excellent.
Spotify.
So I apologize. This is going to sound like self promotion, and in a way, I guess it functionally is, but there's a reason for it. So, uh, I self publish a lot of books, but for those that can see it, I'm
Something
holding
in
up
the froth.
Something in the Froth. This is my first professionally published book through Morgan James Publishing. A whole story there. The reason I am holding it up is that this looks like it's just a coffee table book, and in a way it is. It's entertaining. What it does is it has within it, uh, these images of coffee froth. So
Yeah.
imagine a cup of coffee, latte, the frost on top, but it's not pretty. It's just messy, and there are pages upon pages of just pictures of the froth. If you flip the page, what you see is what I found in the midst of the froth. And so, for those that can't see it, it's like an oyster shell or something, and bubbles coming out of it. Um, it was random froth, but I have been cultivating in my life this understanding of creativity to be able to look at situations, to look at a doodle on paper, and to see something in it. And my hope with this book is not just for it to be a great gift, to entertain people, to be fun to have on a coffee table. That's nice. My bigger hope for this book is that it does two things. One, uh, for those that could see it, the way that the layout is designed is that you can't see the images side by side. You would think that that would be the best way to do it. I did not do it that way because what I want is for someone to come to that first image of just froth and to pause before turning the page so that they can look at it, see
Yes.
what they might see, to practice their own creativity. And so my first hope is that everybody who picks up this book will come to understand that whoever they are, they have innate creativity within them. So, for my faith, I believe that we are created in God's image. And because God's a creator, that means we're created in the image of a creator, which means we have innate creativity within us. It's in our DNA. Our problem is we only think of creativity in terms of art and music. Creativity is being able to see something where there is nothing, to create
Yes.
where there is nothing. And I want everyone to have an opportunity in a simple way to practice that. Doesn't matter if your picture looks good or not, like you saw something in there. But then the second piece is once someone's realized that they have this creativity, they were able to see something in the froth where there was nothing, to then take that and apply that to life. Because what you and I have been coming back to over and over and over are these moments in life where things look messy, where things
Yeah.
are confusing, where it seems like there is no purpose or value, where we are on the cusp of hopelessness. And it is very easy to stay in that space and only see the mess. But I believe, and you and I have had this, just spent time talking about it, we all have this innate creativity within us to be able to look at those situations and find something, to find
Absolutely.
value, to find purpose. And your life has demonstrated that in so many ways. But I want people who are listening, if you don't buy the book, that's fine. Hear me now. You have innate creativity within you to look at the situations in your life and find value and purpose. All it takes is being willing to consider that that might be true and then to step
Absolutely.
into that space. And so, man, there are so many things to be frustrated about in life. But, we talked earlier about this idea of satisfaction. What if, and in the midst of all the bad things in your life, what if there is actually a pathway to satisfaction? What if that pathway to satisfaction doesn't require more money, doesn't require a change in job or home, doesn't require any of these things you think have to happen? What if nothing changes and you can actually find fulfillment? Uh, in scripture, there's a verse the Apostle Paul says. He says, "I've learned the secret to being content in any and every situation." If it's in any situation, that means worst case scenario. He believes you can be content in it. And this dude sacrificed a lot to love God and love others. And he was like beaten and stoned and insulted and shipwrecked, left for dead at one point. I mean, he went through some stuff and he's like, oh, yeah, no, I've learned how to be content no matter what happens to me. What if that is available to all of us? And the only thing stopping us is our death grip on what we think life is supposed to be, what we think we deserve, what we desire. And what could it look
Yeah.
like to just let go one little thing, let go of that one small thing, and then see what happens.
I I implore everyone to do that at least once in their life. At least holding on to these things that a lot of people like, we measure success in different ways. We measure love in different ways. We measure life in different ways. We measure money in different ways. We measure value in different ways. But one thing is central to everything I know of is like, we all hold these ideas near and dear, and if we just let go of them,
Yeah.
if we just let go of them and learn contentment, right? Learn resilience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people would be surprised to see exactly how happy they can be in their current situation. Nobody wants to go out and work for 50 hours a week at $10 an hour. Nobody wants to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really have to. I mean, you got bills to pay, but if those are your circumstances, you've got to find a way to make it work for you. And you've got to let go of some of the things that maybe instead of 50 hours, you will go down to 40 hours. And well, if I do that, then I won't have this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't need that as much as you think you do.
Yeah.
Um, and that's essential. Like that's been going on in my life for the last 12, 13 years, is like when I first started staying at home and being a stay-at-home dad. Now, this was 2013. My
Mm-hmm.
wife was making 35 grand a year. Do you think that we were a family of four at that time. Do you think a family of four could live off 35 grand a year right now?
Yeah.
No, it ain't happening. But at that time, we had double the income when I was working,
Yeah.
go down to $35,000 a year when I wasn't working. And we had just bought a brand new car in
Mm-hmm.
2012. Our payment was $600 a month.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kept that damn car. I should have let it go back, but I kept that damn car because of something somebody said to me. and they said, "You're going to lose that car."
Mm.
And I'm like, "What do you
No on
mean?
that.
That was a dumb decision for you to go out and buy a brand new car. You're going to lose that car."
Mm.
And so I didn't lose that car. I paid it off, and then 3 months later, I wrecked it and totaled it. So that it reminded me when that person said, "You're going to lose that car," and I held on to that car. Even when I couldn't afford it, we held on to that car,
Mm.
and we just tightened our belt other places.
Yeah.
We went from approximately $70,000 a year to $35,000 a year, which means we were hungry at times.
Mm-hmm.
At times we were looking at our utilities getting shut off, but we valued things in such a way that those things were important in the background. What was important in the moment was what was going on with our kids, what was going on with our life. Sure, we were stressed out and it sucked really bad, but we made it through, and it taught me a lot. Do you think right now, do you think a family of four could live off 74,000 a year?
Everything is so expensive right now.
That's what we live off, brother.
Yeah.
A year is what we bring into the house,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we live great.
Yeah.
We make our own bread at home.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those sacrifices that we had to make. And now I can't eat store-bought bread. I don't like it. It doesn't taste good to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there are certain sacrifices that we had to make to get here, but
Mm-hmm.
now that we're here, I wouldn't have it any other way, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've tried. I recently just tried to go back to work, and it didn't work out well. I made it like 3 days, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, for the amount of money that you guys want to pay, um, I'm more valuable at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can get more done. Like I don't have to have a babysitter for my kids if I'm home. I don't have to wonder while I'm at work what everybody's doing,
Yeah.
because I'm here
Yeah.
for the amount that they were willing to pay. I just wasn't willing to do the work. And
Yeah.
at some point that will probably change. I'll probably get a part-time job if this doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to keep this podcast going because it's what I like to do. I love this podcast, and it's it's brought me so much joy over the last 2 years, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also brought me a lot of stress too,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to understand what was important to me with this podcast. And what was important to me with
Yeah.
the podcast is that it's here,
Yeah.
it's available for me.
Yeah.
And I would stress out when I didn't have any content to put out. When I
Mm-hmm.
would stress out when I had a deadline or something like that. And instead of stressing out about it now, it's just like live and let live,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's going to be here for me, and
Yeah.
I'm going to use it for that.
Yeah.
And I just found value in I had to take a beat and
Mm-hmm.
realize what do I value about it. And I think if people just understood, and looked at their lives, and I don't want to be deprecating to anyone. I don't want to put anyone down and say, people are idiots or anything like that. But I think if people slowed down enough to realize that none of the stuff that they think makes them happy really makes them happy, we'd be in a different spot today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we talked about earlier. What can happen when we really understand what we value, and what can happen when we really understand how we think life works. Because sometimes we aren't being honest about our values or aren't prioritizing our values, and we're instead focusing solely on how life works. And for most people, logically, they would say, oh, like we need this much money to survive. Therefore, leaving this job is not an option. It's non negotiable because there's no way it could work. And as you're sharing the story, like, you know, that as I shared earlier, has been my reality as well. That we both, my wife and I, were working in ministry, so we weren't making a lot of money, and we had two kids and one on the way when I unexpectedly lost my job and transitioned into full time volunteer ministry. Uh, People knew I was crazy enough that they kind of accepted it, but they still struggle with the concept of how are they going to make it on one income.
Yeah.
Well, here's how crazy we were. Uh, Longer story, we had an opportunity to go as a family to get some ministry training, and that necessitated my wife leaving her job. And that was not on our plan. But then one day I came home and she's like, I feel like this is what we're supposed to do. So we had no income. And this training was in all places in Hawaii, which we never even
Oh,
thought we'd ever get to go. Definitely could never have afforded, didn't have the money then to do it. Not only did that work out, not only did that money not come from all the sources that we thought it should have come from, whole other story there. Uh, but when we came back, that was 2019. We come back in 2020, February 2020. What happens? Global pandemic.
yeah.
My wife was a teacher. Suddenly she realized, oh, I guess I'm not going back into teaching anytime soon. We had no formal paychecks for 2 years.
Wow.
2 years. And the income that came in was nowhere near what it should have been.
Right.
And yet, we didn't miss a meal. We didn't lose our home. And on top of that, all of our windows were replaced, and like $100,000 worth of work done on the house that we didn't pay for. I mean, so
Wow.
just really unexpected stuff. And this is what I want to say in that. Our starting point should be really knowing what it is we should value, what it is we should prioritize, and learn how to keep that at the forefront so that when the impossible seems like a barrier, we could actually be more open to the idea that maybe the impossible is not as impossible as we think. Maybe there are
Yes.
things that I don't know. So for me, my faith believes that God can do the impossible. And so that really opens up the gamut of what that could look like. And I've experienced it. Uh, but even if somebody doesn't believe in God, there is so much about how things function. Even if somebody sees it as coincidence or luck, we have all had moments where something shouldn't have happened and then it did. And we're like, whoa. If all of our decisions are based out of fear of what could happen and stubbornness around what we believe, man, then we might restrict ourselves in a
Yeah,
space
you're
that we don't
closing
have
off
to be.
doors.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we go with an openness, as several of my recent guests, it's been a theme of curiosity, of considering that this is what I understand, but my understanding is limited. And this is what I value. So I'm going to prioritize that, even if it's going to lead me to have to sacrifice. Man, where we will land is what you described. You will get through the messiness of really confronting false understandings of reality, of really confronting fear, and get out on the other side and realize, oh, I don't even like store bought bread anymore. Oh, I
Yes.
don't actually need that other car. Oh, it's actually fine if life looks this way because it doesn't matter what people think about me. But you
Yes.
can't just get there from an intellectual standpoint. You have to be willing to take that journey. And you and I can be honest with folks that it's taking that first step can be very hard.
Yeah.
That
And
second, third, fourth.
even still, like
Uh
all
huh.
these years later, I stress out. I get
Yeah.
stressed out just
Yeah.
like everybody else does. I've got
Hmm.
bills just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
But that struggle, man, that struggle is kind of I I kind of live for those moments where it gets hard.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, when everything's not so hard, it's like I look back on it. I did that, and it's
Hmm.
now I can say we did that. And
Yeah.
it's crazy that the amount of times where I've had to look back on things and say those,
Yeah.
those affirmations, give myself those affirmations like I did that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, man. I one thing that we haven't really discussed about in this whole thing is family and kids.
Mm.
Do you have a little bit of time to get
Yeah.
into family and kids? Like what's it like with what's it like for your kids growing up in that environment?
Whew.
Do you have those conversations with them?
Yeah. It's been interesting. You know, they're growing up in a household where both of their parents are striving to be Christ followers, but both of their parents also recognize that it is not a healthy thing to force things on them, but rather to represent what we believe authentically, create space for them to process and navigate it, and then journey with them. And so, one thing that's unique for them is they have seen us make some big steps of faith decisions and then see how that played out. and hear our processing of it, but then also make their own assessments.
Yeah.
My oldest is 13, and so he's seen most of it. He still remembers when we got into the process of getting the house that we're currently in, a house that was wildly overpriced for a couple that had no money to buy a new house. And it was an impossible situation. And somehow God made it happen. Like, I cannot explain to you how it all worked out other than God must be able to do miracles because this should not have worked. And years later, my son was processing that. And he was, in his own assessment, was saying, yeah, like, I really love this house. And like, I can see how that shouldn't have worked out. And God provided this and that, remembering specific moments. Um, I think the thing that I'm most excited about, two things. You and I have talked about money a lot. And I know that I live in a very counterintuitive, countercultural way that many would see as reckless, irresponsible. I get that. I get that. I should be hawking all my books to make a whole lot of money, but because of my value of wanting to create space for people, I've got a page set up where I give them away for free, right? Like, I know that my understanding of money, relationship with money is different than most. Um, I don't want to cultivate in my kids this mindset of missional poverty.
Yeah.
That's not the message I want to send. I want to send two messages. No, I'm going to condense it to one. Uh, do not let money have power over you. That's the message I want to
That's
send.
good.
Uh, because when money has power over us, it tells us you need more of me in order to be
Yeah.
happy. Or if you don't have me, things are going to be bad. And it leads us to operate out of fear. So many people operate out of financial fear because that's how things function around us. That's what we've been raised into. And it's very hard to not operate in that way. Uh, but they've been able to see the fruit of that. They've been able to go to Hawaii. We went to Disney as well. We didn't have money to do that, and somehow we had money to do that. Like, it's
Right.
mind blowing stuff that they've been able to experience. Um, but I think the other thing that I'm excited for them to experience is the other value I want them to gain is the importance of loving your neighbor and the importance of
Oh, that's a good one.
doing it before you figure out how to do it or if you want to do it. Because
Absolutely.
they have been there for the story of my friend. They would go out to play in the yard, and my friend would just be sitting in a chair outside the garage. They've been in the car when he hadn't bathed in a while and had messed himself at one point, and so you could smell it. And I've been so encouraged because kids, the younger they are, don't know how to vet their thoughts when they come out in
Have no
words,
filter. Yeah.
have no filter, and they could have said so many things in that moment overtly. It could have embarrassed my friend, but somehow they had within them um, a love and a desire to show dignity to my friend. And I would turn and I could see on their face, like, and they might even quietly acknowledge to me that it smells really bad. But something had been cultivated in them that they wanted to love my friend. I remember growing up, I used to get so frustrated at my mom because we would go to Little Caesars, and Little Caesars had this delicious crazy bread that I never got to eat because every time we picked up our pizza, we would always pass by this woman that either was unhoused or at least had very little money. And my mom would always give her the crazy bread. And I was so mad because that's our crazy bread. And I want the crazy bread. And I don't even know this woman. And you keep giving away our crazy bread. Uh, I didn't understand it as a kid. And I don't think I fought back with her on it, but it stuck with me. And no doubt, my mom's authentic, consistent display of quiet, humble love to this woman planted a seed in me, which is why I was positioned to allow my friend to move into my garage.
That's
Right. And so
beautiful.
this is the thing that I want people to understand, especially parents to understand. Uh, we approach raising our kids from an intellectual standpoint most of the time. And there is an element of that. You tell them what life is, you tell them how they should function, how they shouldn't function. You download the information and you expect them to retain that information. You and I, as adults, struggle to retain information, so much more so kids. It's so much of raising kids is not downloading information and then setting the rules so that everything can operate in the way you want it to. It is that journey of demonstrating, that journey of being authentically present. And so I really do hope that at the end of the story, it's not that my kids come away with certain mindsets around ministry and this, that, and the other, that there would be seeds planted that would equip them as they become adults to not be overpowered by financial fear, to find themselves open to loving their neighbors, even if they would rather not in that moment. That there'd be these seeds
Absolutely.
planted for things that will set them up to be more loving, healthier adults. And then to convey that to others, to plant seeds in others. Like
Yeah.
that is my hope. But man, day to day, you know, it could be tricky. It could be tricky when there's something that we want as a family and the money just isn't there. It
It's
could be tricky when our way of living costs us comfort. But we forget the small things over time. It's the
yeah.
big things, the deep things, not even the big things, but the deep things that stay with us. And that's where I want to make sure I'm not neglecting them.
It's crazy how much we have in common, and our parenting styles are very similar, but our lifestyles are very different.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm not religious. I use curse words.
Mm-hmm.
I, to be honest with you, I'm growing pot right in the same room that I'm podcasting from.
Uh,
So like we couldn't be our lifestyles probably couldn't be any more different, but we parent a lot of the same way. I
mm-hmm.
use a lot of things that happen as like learning lessons.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, what can we take away from this? Like if something bad happens,
Mm-hmm.
like my car accident, what what learning lesson did I get from that? Well, my learning lesson is from that, like not everybody's as insured as well as I am, so I better pay attention. But
Right.
um the learning lesson that I really got from that is that don't be in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in a hurry. I was in a rush that day. And while the accident wasn't my fault, if I wasn't in a hurry, maybe I would have gotten there 30 seconds later, and I really take the moments that, like it's hard to come up with an example off the top of my head right now, but like I try to have those teaching moments with my kids and have them understand things. And like you were saying about being in the car with your friend, my youngest has autism. It's level 2 autism. He's a little higher up on the spectrum than I am, but he says the damnedest things,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't have a dishonest bone in his body. He's honest all the way. And I mean, you know how kids are. Sometimes out of that curiosity, they might
Yeah.
hurt some feelings. And my youngest isn't like that. Like he has a lot of feel when he asks inquisitive questions. And it seems like he understands that he might hurt feelings asking this question, but he's going to ask anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, my kids are so loving, and they do things in a way that I never could.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to the time that I'm allowed to spend with them, and then I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be able to live the way I do, and my kids are very fortunate to have us here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And um, one particular time that I can say that I had a similar moment as you with your mom and the crazy bread was picking up my son in Kansas City. We were doing the child swap day, and we went into the gas station to get a couple of hot dogs. And when it come out, there was a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, and he had a dog with him, and had a backpack on. And there was two backpacks there, so I knew he had a friend there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Hey, are you hungry?" And he's like, "Yes. Oh my goodness, I haven't eaten all day. I'm so hungry." And I saw the dog there, and I saw the extra backpack. We had three hot dogs,
Mm.
and I didn't have any more money. And so I reached down and I said, "Is it okay if I give the dog a hot dog?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I gave the dog a hot dog. And then my son gave the guy, his hot dog. And then we seen the extra backpack there. I said, "Do you have a companion with you?" And he said, "Absolutely." And I said, "Is your companion hungry?" And they said he actually went to the bathroom and he'll be back. And I was like, "Well, here, you give this hot dog to him." And we walked away with no hot dogs
Hmm. Hmm.
because we saw that that gentleman was hungry and we asked. And when we get back to the car, my kid didn't ask any questions. He didn't ask me, why did we just give those hot dogs away? He intuitively knew. He was like 6 or 7. And it was one of those times where I was really proud that he didn't have those questions.
Yeah.
But I asked, I said, "Is there anything you want to talk about, or you have any questions about what just happened?" He said, "No, somebody was hungry and we fed them."
Hmm.
And that moment there,
Yeah.
that's a kind of moment that it happens in my life all the time, where something will happen, and after after that something happens, there'll be that calm in between, and we can kind of reflect on things. And I'm in a constant state of reflection anyway,
Yeah.
but I love it so much that my kids are reflective.
Hmm.
And it really taught me, and we've mentioned this in during this conversation. Each kid is different.
Yeah.
You gotta handle things different with each kid,
Yeah.
but
And then they
in
grow
that,
and change, and now you have to handle them in a new way.
exactly.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
my kids are they're so intuitive on things like that, and I don't know where that comes from, particularly, other than I'm a curious guy. I'm
Hmm.
always curious. I'm always reflective, and maybe they've just picked up on that, or maybe that's just
Yeah.
hereditary or whatever. But
Yeah.
man, I love being a dad more than anything else,
Hmm.
and a husband. I
Yeah.
never thought I would say that, but I love being a husband, and I've been with my wife for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And it's
Wow.
wild how
Yeah.
we we came into this thing, and I was very selfish,
Hmm.
and now my selfishness is giving
Yeah.
and helping others. And
Yeah.
so during Christmas stuff, Christmas and birthdays, people ask, "What do you want?" I don't want anything. I just want to give you stuff. That's me being selfish. That's
uh,
giving for me is very selfish.
okay. You said something interesting about, I don't know where my kids got this from. And it made me think of a passage in the Bible that what Jesus said that confuse a lot of people. And he says something to the effect of, "Come to me like little children." And people have a lot of thoughts around it. But as you're talking, it made me think that maybe part of what's going on here is a significant difference between kids and adults in how we engage reality. Kids are new to the world, new to the reality, and so they are naturally positioned to want to figure out how things work, to
Yeah.
figure out what life is all about. Meanwhile, us adults, we stubbornly feel like we've already figured it out. We've already decided it. And that blocks us from being able to be curious and open. And so I think that's part of what might be going on. Like our kids really do pay attention more than we realize, and sometimes more than we want them to.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but because they are poised to want to learn and want to know. Something else you said that I think is really important, and it almost is like a full circle thing in this conversation, is you are noting that there are a lot of ways you and I are different. Fun fact: uh, I have I am about to turn 43. I have never cursed in my life, and it's not even a prudish thing. It's a whole other story. It's just I'll tell the short version of it. There was a point in middle school in the locker room where all the boys, middle school boys, were pressuring each other to have to curse. And I remember I grew up in the church, so cursing wasn't allowed. But I remember having this feeling of like stubbornness of I'm not going to curse just because you bullied me into it. And
Right.
there was something about getting past that initial temptation moment, that initial threat moment, that once I passed it, I was like, well, why do I even need to curse? Why do I even want to curse? Like I don't need to. So like, I guess I'm just not going to. And I got past that period of life when most people develop cursing.
Yeah.
That then after that, it's like I just don't need that. So I've never cursed. I've also never smoked weed. And so like there are two key ways that you and I are very different, and yet we've just spent over an hour and a half not just having deep conversation, but both of us are smiling and nodding and resonating with each other. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, how there is just so much divisiveness. There's
Yeah.
such deep sides mentality that we come to believe the lie that we can only connect with those who are on our team. We can only
Yeah.
connect with those who live like us and think like us. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes Christians are the worst at this. Sometimes
I
Christians are the
I'm
most
telling you.
closed minded. And part of it is because there are Christians that it's coming from a well intentioned space of believing that God wants us to live in certain ways and avoid certain things and this, that, and the other. And but it gets muddied and leads us to fail to do the one thing that Scripture repeats the most is to love others.
Yes.
And some of my favorite conversations like these have been with a guy named Michael Wiseman, who hosts the Bible Says What podcast, and he is an agnostic atheist that is very blunt and intense at times with what he feels like is ridiculous in Scripture, and a lot of Christians are scared to talk to him. A lot of Christians feel like it would be wrong for them to talk to him, and a lot of Christians engage with him as a threat or a challenge to be defeated. And I almost didn't go on the podcast initially because it's like, this is a debate show, and that's just not who I am. I'm a
Right.
conversation guy. I want to meet someone where they are. So I might make for a boring episode. I've been on this show 4 times. He's been on mine once. And I love every conversation. It can get intense and feisty at times, but uh, we couldn't believe any different about
Right.
God. And that, because I'm a Christian, should be a red flag, should be a danger, right? But no, Michael's Michael's great. Michael loves his kids, loves his
Yeah. Yeah.
family. You know, his mantra is something to the effect of like doing the best good he can. You know, kind of
Yeah.
like you said earlier, he just wants to strive to show up better in life, right? I could get behind that, like, right? And so
That actually sounds Christian to me.
right. I mean, it's, and I might have even said to him at times there are elements of that that are sometimes more Christian than how some Christians operate. And
Right.
so all that to say, and it's people are gonna be like, oh man, he's bashing Christians. I'm not bashing Christians. I'm saying for me, if I'm gonna say that I'm a Christian, then I need to follow Christ. I need to live like that. And if I'm not
Yes.
living like Christ, then I'm not actually being a Christian. I'm being something else. We need to know what it is we believe, what it is we value, because that's going to shape our lives, both through overt decisions we make, but the subconscious as well. We need to be
Yeah.
honest and humble about that. And what you and I have demonstrated for your listeners is if you just approach spaces like this with the value of loving the other person, showing dignity to the other person, believing the other
Absolutely.
person brings value to the table, then you can talk for an hour and a half with a stranger. And I don't know about you, I don't like small talk. I'm an introvert. And yet I love this was great. I loved this.
Right.
You know,
Right.
this is available to all of us and not just available. Our world needs this. The only way you fight sides mentality is you stop playing the game,
That's oh
right?
my goodness. Oh my goodness. That I say that all the time. I have chosen to stop playing the game.
Mhm.
And that's it in one sentence. If I could wrap that up for people, I have chosen to not play the game.
Mhm.
And when you do that, it gives you a certain freedom to not only do other things, but to view things in a different light.
Mhm.
And the tribalism, the divisiveness, all that good stuff, it allows you to look at that from a different angle. And when social media became a thing and people stopped looking at other folks in the face, stopped having face to face interactions, it
Mhm.
allowed them to dehumanize
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that comes from. I think that's where a lot of the divisiveness is coming from, is just failing to realize that the person you're talking to is a human just like you. And I think this would be a great place to wrap up this conversation and leave folks with that and be like, hey, we got to see each other as people first,
Hmm.
not just as an idea. I can't look at you and see a Christian. You can't look at me and see an asshole.
Hmm.
We got to look at each other and see each other as human beings.
Hmm.
You are my brother. I am your brother. And together, with that attitude, we can accomplish so much. We can share so much love. And that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, it's really good. And look, folks, it's easier than we believe it is. The only
Absolutely.
thing stopping us is our minds getting out of control. When you see the guy outside that looks hungry, your mind's going to tell you about your own stomach and this, that, and the other. Or your mind might say, well, what if he's just sitting out here and taking advantage? Like he's just asking people for money. Don't worry about all that. If
Right.
this is what drives us, drives me, is at the end of the day, instead of getting caught up on did I do the right thing, did I make the right choice, my metric is this: did I, to the best of my ability, strive to love God and love others? And if my effort to love others meant that somebody took advantage of me and didn't actually need money, didn't actually need money for a bus, they were just getting money for something else, right? Like doesn't matter because I
That
can't
didn't really
control that.
matter to me either.
I can't control that. And to your point earlier, I don't know their story and what factors in their life have led to that decision that might not be the decision they want to make. That's all inconsequential for me.
I
The
am
question
actually
is,
more likely to give. Like, let's just say there's a person holding a sign on the street, hey, give me money.
mhm,
I am more likely to give if that's an honest sign.
yeah,
If somebody's like, I just want $5 so I can buy a bottle of liquor, I'm
mhm,
more likely to give that person that $5 to go buy the bottle of liquor because at least they were honest about it, you
yeah,
know? And I
yeah,
mean, I've so many things have happened in my life, and I have no room to judge these people from where they're standing at currently versus where I'm at.
yeah,
We all have ages and stages, and maybe they're just in a stage of their life where they just like alcohol. I don't know,
yeah, yeah,
but there's no judgment here.
yeah. I can't remember who said it, but there's a famous phrase: "But for the grace of God, go I." The
Oh
idea
my
that if
goodness,
I
I
were in that
say that all
situation,
the
yeah,
time. I say all the time, like ridiculously amount of times. There by the grace of God, it's not me.
yeah, yeah. And so this is the thing, folks, is there's a lot we can't control in life. You can't control life. We can't even control ourselves most of the time, but we can decide the next interaction we have, the next decision we make, to either show or withhold love. And I think if
That's
more of
right.
us chose to show love, it'd be a different world for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Where can people find you at, man?
Yeah. So as I shared earlier, my heart is to cultivate authentic, accessible space to process so much of what we just talked about, to process life. And I do that through content and connection and in community. Um, so that's the core. If you go to wheredidyousegod.com, it's just a collection of a bunch of different spaces. If somebody wants to have a conversation, there's a way to do that. If somebody's like, I don't want to meet you, I just want to get one of your books and like sit in the corner. Like I said, I'll give books away for free. I don't care. I just want people to know that they are not alone and to know that their doubts, their questions, their concerns are valid, and then to journey alongside them, whether it is near or from afar with words. And so, where did you see God.com? It's all there, but more importantly, it's about that space.
Where did you see God.com? And are your books on Amazon or
All my books are on Amazon, and then Something in the Froth, the one that's being published through Morgan James Publishing, is currently available for pre-order wherever you get books. So that's exciting because it's branched out. It is officially released August 11th, but you can get it anytime.
awesome? Awesome. Paul Granger, it's been a wonderful conversation. I'm almost positive we'll do this again because
I'm game.
I had that much fun. And You had mentioned that you hate small talk. Me too. So the next time we talk, we'll be familiar with each other. It'll be a
Yep.
more interesting conversation.
Yep. Yep. We'll jump right into the deep, deep stuff. People thought this one got deep. Oh, buckle up.
That's right, brother. All right. Hang out with me for just a second. We'll let these guys go. Hey, everybody. I appreciate you. If you stuck around this long, hit that like and subscribe button. But if you guys go to where did you see God.com, and you'll find Paul, and you'll find all his great stuff and his messages. Tune in next week. We'll see you guys later. Bye.